Chapter 1. The Captive Prince. Winter had come early to the kingdom of Ausonia. Snow clung to the castle walls like a silent witness to the war that had shattered the kingdom. The once proud banners of Ausonia hung torn and lifeless above the courtyard, replaced now with the crimson hawk of the Empire of Ardentia. Prince Gabriel stood in chains. The iron shackles around his wrists were heavy, but he refused to let them bend his posture. Even in captivity, he stood tall, his golden hair falling softly around his pale face, his blue eyes burning with quiet defiance. Around him, soldiers watched with curiosity. The defeated Prince of Ausonia had become something of a legend overnight. Some said he fought beside his men on the battlefield like a knight. Others whispered he had refused to flee even when the palace gates were falling. Now he stood before the conqueror's most feared general, General Stefano Valenti. Tall, broad-shouldered, cloaked in black armor etched with silver markings. His dark hair brushed his collar, and his sharp gray eyes studied Gabriel like a puzzle he had not yet solved. The hall was silent as Stefano approached. Gabriel lifted his chin. "If you intend to execute me," he said coolly, "you should do it quickly." A faint murmur rippled through the soldiers. Stefano stepped a few steps away. For a long moment he simply looked at him. Then he spoke. "You fought bravely." The compliment was unexpected. Gabriel frowned slightly. Stefano continued, voice calm but commanding. "Your kingdom surrendered yesterday. The emperor has ordered all royal heirs taken alive." "Why?" asked Gabriel bitterly. Stefano's gaze lingered on him. "Because a living prince is more valuable than a dead one." The chains clinked softly as Gabriel shifted his weight. "If you expect me to beg for mercy, I don't." Their eyes locked. Something unreadable flickered across Stefano's expression. "Take him to the West Tower," the general ordered. Gasps spread among the guards. That tower was reserved for nobles, not prisoners. Gabriel noticed the reaction too. "You're giving me a room?" he asked dryly. Stefano turned away. "You're still a prince." And with that, the most feared general in the empire walked out of the hall, leaving behind a captive prince who suddenly had more questions than answers.
Chapter 2. A Prison with Silk Curtains. Gabriel expected a dungeon. Instead, he was given a chamber overlooking the frozen gardens. The room was simple but comfortable. Stone walls warmed by a fireplace, a large bed with heavy velvet blankets, and tall windows that caught the pale winter light. The guards removed his chains. Gabriel rubbed his wrists slowly. "Comfortable prison," he muttered. A servant placed a tray of food on the table. He hadn't eaten since the battle. Still, pride kept him from touching it. Hours passed. The sky darkened. Then the door opened. Gabriel looked up sharply. General Stefano stepped inside. The guards remained outside. Silence stretched between them. Stefano removed his gloves slowly. "I came to speak with you." Gabriel leaned back against the window. "You already conquered my kingdom. What more is there to say?" Stefano studied him. "You're not what I expected." "And what did you expect?" "A coward." Gabriel laughed softly. "You invaded my country. Forgive me if I don't try to impress you." Stefano stepped closer. Too close. Gabriel suddenly realized how tall the general was, how his presence seemed to fill the entire room. "You stood your ground during the siege, even when your soldiers were retreating." Gabriel's voice softened. "They trusted me." something shifted in Stefano's gaze. Respect. "You care about your people," he said. Gabriel met his eyes. "They are my people." For a moment, neither man spoke. The air felt strangely heavy. Stefano finally turned away. "You won't be harmed here." "That's generous of my enemy." Stefano glanced back at him. "Perhaps." Their eyes held again, and for reasons neither of them understood yet, neither looked away.
Chapter 3. The Enemy Who Visits at Night. The general kept returning. At first, Gabriel assumed it was interrogation, but Stefano never asked military questions. Instead, their conversations drifted into strange territory: history, philosophy, politics, even poetry. "You read poetry?" Gabriel asked one evening with disbelief. Stefano smirked faintly. "I had a tutor once." Gabriel studied him. "You're not what I expected either." "And what did you expect?" "A brutal warlord." Stefano chuckled quietly. "I can still be that." The fire crackled softly between them. Snow drifted outside the window. Neither man noticed how close they had begun sitting, or how their conversations lasted deeper into the night with each passing day. Chapter 4. A Dangerous Curiosity. One night, Gabriel caught Stefano staring, not at the fire, at him. The prince raised an eyebrow. "Do I amuse you, General?" Stefano looked almost embarrassed. "No." "Then why do you keep looking at me like that?" The silence stretched. Stefano finally admitted softly, "Because you fascinate me." Gabriel blinked. No one had ever said that to him before. "You're strange," Gabriel said. "So I've been told." Their shoulders were almost touching now. The tension was impossible to ignore. Gabriel spoke carefully. "You realize I'm your prisoner." Stefano's voice lowered. "I know." Their eyes met, and suddenly the distance between them felt incredibly small. Chapter 5. When Enemies Cross the Line. It happened unexpectedly. A heated argument. Gabriel had just learned that some Ausonian nobles had been executed for rebellion. "You call this mercy?" Gabriel snapped. Stefano's voice rose too. "They plotted an assassination. They were defending their country. And I am maintaining order." The room felt charged with emotion. Gabriel stepped closer. "So that's how you justify it." Stefano grabbed his wrist without thinking. "Listen to me." Gabriel tried to pull away. Their bodies collided. Silence fell. They were suddenly inches apart, breathing hard, eyes locked. Gabriel whispered, "You're still the enemy." Stefano's gaze dropped briefly to Gabriel's lips. When he looked back up, something had changed. Perhaps. And then he kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, surprising both of them. Gabriel froze at first. Then slowly, he kissed back. The moment lasted only seconds, but when they pulled apart, the world felt different. Neither of them spoke, because neither of them knew what they had just begun. Chapter 6. A Night That Changes Everything. After the kiss, everything changed. Stefano tried to stay away. He failed. Every night he found himself standing outside Gabriel's chamber, and every night he entered. One evening, as a snowstorm winds howled outside, their conversation faded into silence. They were sitting close again, too close. Gabriel spoke softly. "You shouldn't keep coming here." Stefano's voice was rough. "I know." "But you do." "Yes." Gabriel searched his face. Why? Stefano's answer came without hesitation. Because I want you. The words hung in the air. Gabriel's breath caught. Slowly he reached for Stefano's hand. You're dangerous, Gabriel whispered. So are you. Then Gabriel pulled him closer. Their kiss this time was slower, deeper. Stefano's arms wrapped around him instinctively. They stumbled toward the bed. The world outside disappeared. Clothes loosened. Skin met skin. Their movements were urgent but filled with hesitation, as if both men were aware they were crossing a line that could never be undone. The night was filled with quiet breaths and whispered names. And when they finally slept, Gabriel rested against Stefano's chest, like enemies who had forgotten the war.
Chapter 7. Secrets in the Dark.
Morning arrived quietly, but the warmth of the night before lingered in the room. Gray winter light slipped through the tall windows of the west tower, illuminating the tangled blankets on the bed. Gabriel woke first. For a few seconds, he simply lay still, listening to the faint crackle of the dying fire. Then he felt the arm around his waist. Stefano. The general was still asleep behind him, one arm draped loosely across Gabriel's stomach, his breathing deep and steady. Without his armor and sharp military posture, he looked younger, softer. Gabriel turned his head slightly to look at him. This man was the general who conquered his kingdom, and yet he had held Gabriel like something precious only hours ago. The thought made Gabriel's chest tighten. Carefully, he slipped out of the bed. Stefano stirred but didn't wake. Gabriel pulled on his shirt and walked to the window. Outside, the snow-covered gardens were quiet. Too quiet. He rested his forehead against the cold glass. What am I doing? Behind him, the bed shifted. Stefano sat up slowly, running a hand through his dark hair. Regretting it already? Gabriel didn't turn around. On what? Gabriel finally looked back. On whether you do. For a moment, Stefano simply studied him. Then he shook his head. No. The answer came without hesitation. Gabriel's expression softened slightly. That's the problem, he said quietly. Stefano stepped closer until they stood only inches apart. Why? Because nothing about this makes sense, Gabriel admitted. You're the man who invaded my country.
And you're the prince I was supposed to deliver in chains.
Their eyes held. And yet, Stefano continued softly, here we are. Gabriel let out a quiet breath. The weight of reality slowly returned. War still existed beyond these walls.
Armies still occupied his homeland, and Stefano was still their commander. You should go, Gabriel said finally. Stefano frowned. You're sending me away already? If someone sees you leaving my chamber at dawn, it won't take long for rumors to spread. Stefano crossed his arms. Let them talk. Gabriel shook his head. You underestimate how dangerous court rumors can be. Stefano looked unconvinced. Gabriel stepped closer and lowered his voice. If the emperor hears that his most trusted general is sharing a bed with the captive prince of the enemy kingdom, what do you think happens then? Silence settled between them. Stefano knew the answer. Nothing good. He sighed and picked up his coat. You're right. But before leaving, he stopped beside Gabriel again. His fingers brushed lightly against Gabriel's cheek. A brief touch. Soft. Tonight, Stefano said quietly. Gabriel met his gaze. After a moment, he nodded. Yes. Stefano left the room. But that night, as the castle fell silent and the moon rose high above the snowy towers,
There was a quiet knock on Gabriel's door, and he already knew who it was.
Chapter 8. A Dangerous Bond.
Days passed, then weeks, and still Stefano kept coming back. Always at night, always when the castle corridors had grown quiet. Sometimes they spoke for hours. Other nights they barely spoke at all. Gabriel began to learn sides of Stefano no one else ever saw. The general who terrified enemy armies also loved music. He played the lute poorly but enthusiastically. He read history books before bed. And sometimes, when he thought Gabriel wasn't looking, he smiled in a way that made him look almost boyish. "You're staring again," Stefano said one night. Gabriel leaned against the headboard with a smirk. "You were singing." Stefano groaned. "I told you not to mention that again." "It was impressive." "It was terrible." Gabriel laughed quietly. The sound warmed the room more than the fireplace. Eventually, the laughter faded. Stefano reached for him. Their kisses had become familiar now, gentler than that first desperate moment. Gabriel rested his forehead against Stefano's shoulder afterward. "You're risking everything by being here," he murmured. Stefano wrapped an arm around him. "I'm aware. If the Emperor finds out, I'll deal with it." Gabriel looked up at him. "You say that as if you're invincible." Stefano smirked. "I've survived 10 years of war. This is different." Stefano studied him carefully. "You're worried about me." Gabriel scoffed lightly. "Don't flatter yourself." But his fingers were still tangled in Stefano's shirt. Stefano smiled faintly. Outside the tower, however, whispers had begun spreading. Soldiers had started noticing how often the general walked toward the West Tower at night. One evening, as Stefano passed through the courtyard, 2 younger officers exchanged glances. "General," one of them said cautiously. Stefano stopped. "Yes?" "The tower guards mentioned you've been visiting the prisoner quite often." Stefano's eyes hardened instantly. "He's a prince," he replied coldly. "He requires supervision." The officers quickly nodded. "Of course, General." Stefano walked away without another word. But as he climbed the tower stairs that night, a quiet thought lingered in his mind. Sooner or later, someone would start asking the wrong questions.
Chapter 9. The Emperor's Order. Spring arrived with the sound of trumpets. The Emperor had come to the conquered kingdom. The entire castle buzzed with preparation. Banners were hung, courtiers flooded the halls, and soldiers lined the courtyard in perfect rows. Gabriel watched everything from the tower window. "Your Emperor enjoys dramatic entrances," he muttered. Stefano stood beside him, his armor newly polished. "He's the ruler of half the continent. That doesn't mean he needs a parade." Stefano chuckled softly. But the amusement faded quickly because the Emperor hadn't come just to celebrate victory. He had come to decide Ausonia's future. That afternoon, Stefano was summoned to the throne hall. Hours later, he returned to the tower. Gabriel noticed his expression immediately. What happened? Stefano closed the door behind him slowly. "The Emperor has made his decision." Gabriel waited. "You're being taken to the capital." The words hung in the air. Gabriel's face remained calm. "As a prisoner? As a symbol."
Stefano's voice was tight. "You'll be paraded through the capital as proof of Ardentia's victory." Gabriel looked back out the window. Snow had begun melting in the gardens. "I see." Stefano stepped closer. "You're not angry?" Gabriel gave a faint smile. "Anger won't change it." But Stefano could see the tension in his shoulders. "When do we leave?" Gabriel asked. "In 3 days." Silence fell between them. Gabriel turned around slowly. "So this is how it ends?" Stefano shook his head immediately. "No." Gabriel studied him. "You sound certain." Stefano stepped forward and took his hand. "Because I'm coming with you." Gabriel blinked. "You?" "I'll be leading the escort." The prince's expression softened. "That's not exactly comforting." Stefano pulled him closer. "At least I'll still be there." Gabriel rested his head against his chest. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Gabriel whispered, "What happens when we reach the capital?" Stefano didn't answer, because he didn't know.
Chapter 10. A Crown and a Choice. The capital of Ardentia was magnificent. Golden towers, endless marble streets, crowds of thousands. When Gabriel was escorted through the city gates, people lined the roads to watch. Some cheered, others whispered. The captured Prince of Ausonia had become a spectacle. Gabriel rode calmly beside Stefano the entire time. He refused to look defeated. If he had to be displayed like a trophy, he would at least look like a king. Days later, the imperial court gathered to announce Ausonia's fate. The emperor's voice echoed through the throne hall. "Ausonia will remain a kingdom," he declared. Gasps spread across the court. "But it will serve under the authority of Ardentia." Gabriel remained perfectly still. Then came the final condition. Prince Gabriel will return as ruler of Ausonia under the guidance of the Empire. Murmurs filled the hall. The emperor smiled slightly. "And to secure this alliance, he will marry a noble chosen by the crown." Stefano's jaw tightened instantly. Gabriel didn't react outwardly, but his fingers slowly curled into fists. That night, Gabriel stood alone on a palace balcony. The capital lights stretched endlessly across the horizon. Footsteps approached. "Stefano." "You heard the emperor's decision?" Gabriel said quietly. "Yes." Gabriel looked out over the city. "My kingdom survives." "That's good news." "Is it?" Stefano stepped beside him. "You'll rule again." Gabriel laughed softly. "And marry someone I've never met." Silence lingered. Then Stefano spoke. "You don't have to." Gabriel turned toward him. "Oh? You could leave." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "Leave the Empire?" "With me." Gabriel stared at him. "You're serious?" "Yes." The wind stirred between them. "You'd abandon everything?" Gabriel asked. Stefano's answer came without hesitation. "Yes." For a long moment, Gabriel said nothing. Then slowly, he stepped forward. His hand rested against Stefano's chest. "You realize running away with the enemy general might start another war." Stefano smiled faintly. "Worth the risk." Gabriel studied him. Then he leaned forward and kissed him. Soft. Certain. When they pulled apart, Gabriel whispered, "Then we should probably leave before sunrise." Stefano smiled, and beneath the quiet stars of the imperial capital, a captive prince and the general who conquered his kingdom chose a future no emperor could control.